Sign over your house, or you will never see your grandchildren again. Those words emerged from my daughter in law's mouth with venom as I observed her impeccably manicured finger tapping against the documents she had placed on my kitchen table. This was the same kitchen table where I had hosted Thanksgiving dinners for the past 30 years, where I had taught my son to do his homework. Now, his wife was threatening to remove my grandchildren from my life unless I relinquished everything. My name is Barbara, and I am 72 years old. Before I recount what transpired next, I would appreciate knowing where you are viewing this from. Please share your state or country in the comments. It comforts me to know I am not alone in this tumultuous world. After everything I endured, I could certainly use the reminder that good people still exist. Allow me to take you back to where this nightmare truly began. My husband, Richard, passed away 4 years ago. After 46 years of marriage, one morning, he simply did not wake up. The doctors attributed it to his heart, but I believe he had grown weary of fighting. He had been tired for some time, though he never complained. That was Richard, stoic until the very end. Together, we built a good life. Richard worked as an engineer for Boeing, while I dedicated 30 years to teaching elementary school. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable. We purchased our home in 1978 for $65,000 in a modest suburb of Seattle. Now it was valued at nearly $900,000, although I would never consider selling it. This home held every memory that mattered. My son Derek was our only child. We had desired more children, but that did not come to pass, and so we invested everything in him. Perhaps that was our first mistake, giving too much and expecting too little in return. He was a good kid, though intelligent, humorous, and kind. At least he used to be. Then he met Vanessa. I will never forget the first time Derek brought her home. She was beautiful in that calculated manner some women master, with highlighted hair that appeared natural but likely cost a fortune, designer clothing with discreet labels, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She worked in pharmaceutical sales and claimed to earn a decent income. Derek was utterly smitten. "Mom, isn't she incredible?" he whispered to me in the kitchen while Vanessa was in the bathroom. I wanted to respond. She has looked at her phone 17 times in the last hour and hasn't asked us a single question about ourselves. But instead, I smiled and said, "She's lovely, dear." Richard caught my eye across the room and conveyed a look that indicated we would discuss this later. We did talk about it later, lying in bed that night. Richard believed I was being overprotective. Perhaps he was right. Maybe I merely perceived something he was unwilling to acknowledge because Derek was so happy. They married 14 months later in a wedding that cost $40,000. Richard and I contributed half, even though Vanessa's parents could have easily covered the entire expense. That should have served as my first significant warning sign. Not the wedding cost, but Vanessa's reaction when Richard suggested we split the costs evenly between both families. She displayed a fleeting look of cold calculation before her smile returned. "Oh, Barbara, Richard, you are so generous," she said, touching my arm in a manner intended to seem affectionate but felt possessive. "Derek is so fortunate to have parents who wish to invest in his happiness." The term invest stuck with me, not support or celebrate, but invest, as if our relationship with our son had turned into a financial transaction. The first 2 years of their marriage were relatively harmonious. Derek appeared happy, and they visited every few weeks for dinner. Vanessa would bring expensive wine and discuss her sales figures and their planned trips. Derek had begun working for her father's commercial real estate company, which paid well but seemed to drain something essential from him. The light in his eyes dimmed gradually. Then Vanessa became pregnant with their first child. I cried when Derek called to share the news. Richard lifted me and twirled me around the kitchen, both of us laughing like teenagers. We were going to be grandparents. After experiencing so much loss, feeling as if something were missing following Richard's retirement and my own, this felt like purpose returning to our lives. Lily was born on a Tuesday in March, and the moment I held her, I grasped what people meant when they said, "Grandchildren are the reward for not killing your teenagers." She was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and large gray eyes that seemed to peer directly into my soul. I was utterly enchanted. For a time, everything was good. Vanessa appeared softer as a new mother, less preoccupied with appearances and more engaged with the baby. I visited 3 times a week to help, doing laundry, preparing meals, and holding Lily while Vanessa napped. Derek was working long hours, and I was happy to support them in any way I could. Then James arrived 22 months later, and with him came a shift I initially struggled to identify. Vanessa began making comments, small remarks easy to dismiss individually, but harder to ignore as a pattern. "Oh, Barbara, that's an old-fashioned way to do things," she would say when I suggested placing the baby on his stomach for tummy time. "We're using the latest research, not the methods from the 80s when I shared insights from my decades of teaching young children." Derek began to back her up, not aggressively, but with a resigned tone that indicated he had already lost this argument in private. "Mom, Vanessa is really knowledgeable about this stuff," he would say. "She's read all the latest books." As if my 30 years of experience with children meant nothing compared to some parenting guru's bestseller. I bit my tongue, smiled, and adjusted my approach. That is what one does when striving to remain in their grandchildren's lives. One becomes smaller, quieter, more convenient, and adapts to whatever version of oneself is deemed acceptable. Richard noticed, but he fell ill before he could confront Derek about it. After Richard's death, everything changed. Not immediately. Grief often reveals the better sides of people. Initially, Derek and Vanessa supported me during the funeral, assisting with arrangements and managing visitors. Vanessa even embraced me at the wake, whispering, "We are here for you, Barbara. You are not alone." For about 6 months, they maintained the appearance of support. Derek would call twice a week, and they would bring the children over on Sundays. I would watch Lily, now 4, running through the backyard while James toddled after her. I felt Richard's absence like a physical ache, but at least I had them. At least I still had my family. Then Vanessa began her campaign. It started with concerns about my large house and whether it was too much for me to manage alone. "Barbara, this place is what, 2,800 square feet? That's a lot for one person. Have you considered downsizing?" I would think about it for perhaps half a second before recalling that every room held memories of Richard, moments from Derek's childhood, fragments of the life we had constructed. "I am managing just fine," I would reply. Yet Vanessa persisted. Each visit brought a new angle. "The yard is too much work. The stairs could be dangerous. The neighborhood is changing. What if you fell and no one found you for days? What about your retirement funds? Isn't maintaining this place depleting your savings?" She was not entirely incorrect regarding the finances. Property taxes had risen to nearly $9,000 a year. Utilities, insurance, maintenance, all of it added up. My teacher's pension and Richard's Social Security covered the expenses, but there was little left over. I had started to be more frugal, occasionally skipping my book club lunches, opting for generic brands at the grocery store. Derek began to echo Vanessa's concerns, though his approach was softer, tinged with sadness. "Mom, I worry about you here all alone. What if something happens?" "I have my medical alert button," I would remind him. "I have neighbors. I am fine, Derek." Yet I could see the script Vanessa had written playing out behind his eyes. She was feeding him lines, molding his worry into something that served her purposes. The real turning point occurred approximately 18 months after Richard's passing. Vanessa and Derek invited me to dinner, just the adults, no children. They had hired a babysitter, which seemed odd for a simple family dinner. Vanessa prepared her famous chicken piccata, which I had tasted before and found mediocre, but I complimented it nonetheless, as one does. After dessert, Derek cleared his throat in that manner, indicating a rehearsed speech was forthcoming. "Mom, Vanessa, and I have been discussing your financial situation and your safety in this large house. We have been exploring some lovely senior living communities." "I am not moving into a retirement home," I interjected, striving to maintain a steady voice. "I appreciate your concern, but I am 70, not 90. I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself." Vanessa's smile tightened at the edges. "Of course you are, Barbara. We are merely thinking ahead, planning for the future." Their planning ahead became increasingly aggressive over the next few months. They would send me listings for condos, apartments, and even assisted living facilities, highlighting amenities as if I were a child in need of constant entertainment. I ceased responding to their emails or entertaining their suggestions. That was when Vanessa altered her tactics entirely. She began to limit my access to the grandchildren. Initially, it was subtle. Plans would change at the last minute. "Oh, Barbara, I'm so sorry, but Lily has a play date we forgot about. James isn't feeling well. Better not risk getting you sick. It's just such a hectic week. Perhaps next weekend?" Next weekend would arrive, and there would be another excuse. Derek would call with apologies that sounded hollow, scripted. "Mom, you know how it is with kids. Their schedules are chaotic. We will make it work soon, I promise." But soon never arrived. 2 weeks turned into a month, and a month into 6 weeks. I would see photos on Vanessa's Facebook of the children at the park, at birthday parties, at restaurants, living their lives without me. She would post them publicly, as if wanting me to witness what I was missing. I attempted to confront Derek directly. "Why are you excluding me from the kids' lives?" "We are not shutting you out, Mom. We are just busy, and honestly, some of your comments about our parenting have made Vanessa uncomfortable. She feels judged." "What comments? When have I ever criticized your parenting?" "You suggested Lily watch less TV. You mentioned James needing more outdoor time. Vanessa feels like you're questioning her choices." I wanted to scream that those were not criticisms, but normal grandparent observations, gentle suggestions that used to be integral to our family communication. However, I could hear in Derek's voice that he was defending a position Vanessa had constructed for him brick by brick. "Derek, I love those children. I would never intentionally hurt you or Vanessa. If I have said something inappropriate, I apologize. Please just allow me to see my grandchildren." There was a long pause. "We will think about it, Mom," he replied, as though access to my own grandchildren was a privilege granted based on my behavior, compliance, and willingness to remain within whatever confines they had established for me. That was 3 months before Vanessa appeared at my door with her papers and her ultimatum. I should mention that Richard and I had arranged matters years prior after consulting with an estate attorney. We believed we had been prudent. Richard had established a family trust designed to avoid probate and protect our assets. The house was not technically in my name alone. It was held by the trust, and I was the trustee. Richard and I had originally been co-trustees, and after his death, Derek was named the successor trustee, but only upon my death or incapacity. This meant I retained control over everything while I was alive and competent. The house could not simply be signed over with a straightforward deed transfer. It would require dissolving the trust or a trustee decision, along with specific legal procedures. Vanessa was unaware of any of this. We had never discussed the trust's details with Derek beyond the basics, and evidently he had never mentioned it to her, or if he had, she had not grasped the implications. She viewed Barbara's house and assumed it could be transferred like any other property. This brings me to that dreadful afternoon when Vanessa arrived unannounced. I had been working in the garden, pulling weeds from the rose bushes Richard had planted for our 20th anniversary. My hands were dirty, and I had soil under my nails when the doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone, and when I opened the door to find Vanessa standing there in her business casual attire with a leather folder under her arm, my stomach immediately tensed. "Barbara, we need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. She went straight to the kitchen table and laid out her folder, pulling out papers that I could see were some form of deed or transfer documents. Her demeanor had shifted entirely. No more feigned sweetness, no more pretense of concern. This was Vanessa in full predator mode. "I will be direct with you," she stated, her voice cold and rehearsed as though she had practiced this speech. "Derek and I need this house. We have outgrown our current place. The children require more space, and frankly, you do not need all of this square footage. We have been patient. We have attempted to suggest alternatives, but you have been obstinate regarding this." I stood there, still holding my gardening gloves, attempting to comprehend what was unfolding. "Vanessa, this is my home. Richard and I built our life here. I will not give you my house." She smiled, but it was the smile of someone who knew she held all the cards. "Here's the thing, Barbara. You love those grandchildren, don't you? Lily is starting to forget who you are. James asks about you occasionally, and honestly, it breaks my heart to keep explaining that Grandma is too busy for them. My heart began to race. I am not too busy. You have been keeping them from me. That's one interpretation, she shrugged. Here's another. You sign these papers, transfer the house to Derek and me, and you get to be a grandmother again. We might even allow you to stay in the guest room sometimes, though we would need to establish some boundaries about that. Let me visit, let me stay, as if I would be a guest in the home I have lived in for 45 years. And if I do not sign, I inquired, although I already anticipated the response. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, exuding comfort and confidence. Then you will never see Lily or James again. We will relocate if necessary. Derek is already exploring positions in other states. By the time you could contest this in court, if you could even afford to, those children will not remember you at all. Is that what you desire? To be the grandmother they never knew? The tragic story we tell them about family members who prioritized pride over love? My hands trembled. I gazed down at the documents she had spread across my table. My kitchen table, where I had fed my son breakfast before school for 18 years, where Richard and I had paid bills, planned vacations, and laughed over coffee on Sunday mornings. You are blackmailing me, I said quietly. I am offering you a choice, Vanessa corrected. A generous one, in fact. You get to downsize as you should have done a year ago. You get to be present in your grandchildren's lives. And honestly, Barbara, you get to stop living in the past. Richard is gone. Holding on to this house will not resurrect him. That last line, her calculated cruelty regarding my deceased husband, was what instigated a shift within me. I could feel the tears welling up, but I would not grant her the satisfaction. Where is Derek? I asked. At work. This is between us, woman to woman. Derek will support whatever I decide. That was the painful truth. My son had become so thoroughly controlled by this woman that she did not even require him to be present for this ambush. She knew he would acquiesce. I looked at those papers once more. My mind raced, searching for options, seeking a way out. But all I could envision was Lily's face, hear James's laughter. Could I genuinely choose a house over my grandchildren? Would Richard want me to fight this if it meant losing Derek's children forever? I need time to think, I stated. You have 2 minutes, Vanessa replied, glancing at her phone. I have a showing at 4. Of course, she had a showing. This was merely another transaction for her, another negotiation. She likely had spreadsheets assessing the equity in my house, strategizing how they would renovate, perhaps even flip it for a profit. I contemplated calling a lawyer, but I had seen enough legal dramas to understand that custody rights for grandparents are practically non-existent. Even if I could fight, it would take months, perhaps years, and cost money I did not possess. Vanessa was aware of all this. She had likely conducted thorough research prior to her visit. So I made a choice. Perhaps it was the incorrect choice. Perhaps I was being weak. But in that moment, faced with the prospect of losing my grandchildren forever, I could not envision another path forward. Give me a pen, I said. Vanessa's smile was victorious, triumphant. She had won, and she knew it. She retrieved an expensive pen from her purse, probably the same pen she utilized to finalize real estate deals, and handed it to me. I signed the papers, every page she indicated, every line she pointed to. My hand trembled so severely that my signature resembled an old woman's shaky scrawl, which I suppose it was. Each stroke of the pen felt like relinquishing a piece of Richard, a fragment of my history, a part of myself. If you are enjoying this story and wish to witness how justice is served, and trust me, it does, please subscribe to my channel. You will not want to miss what transpires next. When I finished signing the last page, Vanessa collected the documents with efficient movements, sliding them back into her leather folder. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and for just a brief moment, I detected something in her expression. Not quite guilt, but perhaps the faintest acknowledgement that she had crossed a line she had not anticipated crossing. Yet it passed swiftly. You made the right choice, Barbara, she stated, her voice reverting to the false warmth she employed in public. This is better for everyone. You will see. When can I see the kids? I inquired, loathing how small my voice sounded. We will be in touch, she replied, which was not an answer at all. Derek and I need to review the paperwork with our attorney to ensure everything is in order. These matters take time, perhaps in a few weeks. She let herself out, and I stood there in my kitchen, feeling as though the walls were closing in. I had just signed away my home, the place where I had raised my son, where I had loved my husband, where every crack in the wall and stain on the counter told a story of the life I had lived. I sank into a chair and finally allowed myself to cry. For 3 days, I existed in a fog. I did not call anyone. I did not leave the house except to retrieve my mail. I wandered through rooms I had inhabited for decades, touching furniture, gazing at photographs, attempting to memorize every detail before it was taken from me. I stood in Derek's old bedroom, still painted the blue he had chosen at age 12, and pondered where everything had gone awry. Had I been too lenient with him, too generous? Had Richard and I created this situation by never teaching Derek to stand up for himself, to think independently? Or was Vanessa simply that skilled at manipulation, adept at identifying weaknesses and exploiting them? I kept checking my phone, hoping Derek would call, hoping he would tell me he would put an end to this madness, that Vanessa had gone too far. But the phone remained silent. On the third evening, I was sitting in the living room, staring into space when my phone finally rang. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen, and my heart leaped. Perhaps she was calling to schedule a visit with the kids. Perhaps this nightmare was nearing its conclusion. I answered, and immediately screaming erupted through the speaker, loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "What the hell did you do?" Vanessa shrieked. "What kind of sick game are you playing?" I was so taken aback that I could not form words. This was not the composed, calculating woman who had sat at my kitchen table. This was someone unhinged, furious, completely out of control. "The house isn't even yours," she continued, her voice raw with rage. "It's in some goddamn trust. The title company said we cannot file the deed, that you don't have the authority to transfer it, that you made me think I was getting this house. You humiliated me in front of my attorney. Derek is furious. How could you do this to us?" That was when I began to laugh. I could not help it. The sound escaped me like something that had been trapped for 3 days. Perhaps longer, perhaps for the entire 18 months since Vanessa had initiated her campaign to isolate me from my family. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, until my stomach ached, until Vanessa's screams on the other end of the phone faded into mere background noise against my own relief. "You think this is amusing?" she screeched. "You fraudulent. Get Derek on the phone. Your mother is insane." I heard fumbling, and then Derek's voice emerged, tight with anger. "Mom, what the hell? Vanessa's lawyer says the house is in Dad's trust. You cannot just sign it over. Did you know this? Did you do this deliberately?" "Yes, Derek," I responded, my laughter finally subsiding into something calmer, colder. I knew precisely what I was doing. The silence on the other end was profound. "The house is in the family trust your father established 20 years ago," I continued, my voice steady now. "I am the trustee. The house cannot be transferred without specific legal procedures. Certainly not with a simple quitclaim deed your wife drafted. Any estate attorney would have informed you of that if you had bothered to consult one before attempting to extort me." "Extort?" Vanessa grabbed the phone back. "We were helping you. We were trying to provide you with options. You threatened to cut me off from my grandchildren unless I surrendered my house," I stated. "That is not assistance, Vanessa. That is blackmail. And I allowed you to believe you had won because I wanted to see precisely how far you would go. It turns out quite far." "You cannot do this," Vanessa replied, but her voice had lost its commanding tone. She sounded younger, suddenly less assured. "We have those papers. You signed them. We will find a lawyer who can resolve this." "Good luck with that," I replied. "You will discover that the trust documents are very clear regarding the transfer procedures. And even if you could somehow challenge it, which you cannot, you would require my cooperation as the trustee, which you are not going to receive." "Then you will never see those kids again," Vanessa shouted, reverting to her sole real weapon. "I swear to God, Barbara, you have just made the biggest mistake of your life." "No," I replied quietly. "The biggest mistake of my life was not standing up to you sooner. I am done now. I am done being manipulated, done being threatened, done watching my son transform into someone I do not recognize because he is too weak to confront you. Mom, Derek began, but I interrupted. You made your choice, Derek. When you stood by and allowed your wife to threaten me, when you permitted her to use your children as leverage, when you became complicit in attempting to steal my home, you made your choice. I hope it was worth it. I hung up before either could respond. My hands trembled again, but this time it was from adrenaline, not fear. For the first time in 18 months, I felt like myself again. Then I did what I should have done from the very beginning. I called a lawyer. The attorney I contacted, Patricia Morrison, was a family law specialist recommended by someone from my book club. She had experienced her own nightmare with manipulative relatives and had developed a reputation for tackling cases involving elder financial abuse. I met with her 2 days after Vanessa's phone outburst, bringing every document I possessed, the trust papers, the quitclaim deed Vanessa had coerced me into signing, and copies of the text messages illustrating the systematic exclusion from my grandchildren's lives. Patricia listened attentively, taking notes, her expression growing more serious as I spoke. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and shook her head. Barbara, what your daughter-in-law did is not only morally wrong, it is potentially criminal. This is textbook elder financial abuse and coercion. You could press charges. The thought had never crossed my mind. I do not want her arrested, I said. I merely want her to leave me alone and for Derek to comprehend what he allowed to happen. Understood, Patricia replied. However, I strongly recommend we issue a cease and desist letter outlining the legal issues at play. It will clarify that any further attempts at coercion, any continued denial of access to your grandchildren as punishment for not relinquishing the house will result in legal action. Sometimes people like Vanessa only respond when they recognize they have crossed legal boundaries. She drafted a letter that was both professional and devastating. It detailed the attempted exploitation, cited specific statutes regarding elder financial abuse in our state, and included a comprehensive timeline of Vanessa's campaign of isolation and manipulation. It noted that while the quitclaim deed was invalid due to the trust structure, the attempt itself demonstrated clear intent to commit fraud. The letter demanded that all harassment cease immediately and that reasonable grandparent access be reinstated. Patricia sent copies to Vanessa, Derek, and for good measure, to Vanessa's father, who owned the real estate firm where Derek worked. That last touch was Patricia's idea. Men like him do not appreciate when family drama impacts their business reputation, she explained. The response was swift. Derek called me 6 hours after the letters were delivered, his voice shaky and subdued. Mom, I am so sorry. I never intended for things to escalate this far. Vanessa told me you had agreed to downsize, that it was your idea. I had no idea she had threatened you. I swear I didn't know. A part of me wanted to believe him, to accept that he had been manipulated as much as I had. Yet another part of me, the part that had signed those papers with trembling hands, that had cried alone for 3 days, knew better. Derek, you were present when the excuses began. You heard her canceling visits, fabricating reasons I could not see the kids. Perhaps she did not disclose the exact words she used, but you recognized something was amiss. And you chose her over me. You chose to believe her version of events over your own mother. I understand, he said, and I detected genuine anguish in his voice. I know, and I lack an excuse. I should have protected you. Dad would be so disappointed in me. That realization shattered something in both of us. We cried together over the phone, and for a fleeting moment, I had my son back. The legal letter achieved what Patricia had predicted it would. It frightened Vanessa into compliance, not because she suddenly developed a conscience, but because her father evidently had a serious conversation with her regarding how allegations of elder abuse could ruin both her reputation and his business. Derek later informed me that his father-in-law had threatened to terminate him if this situation was not resolved immediately and discreetly. Within a week, I received a formal apology from Vanessa via email. It was clearly composed by an attorney and admitted nothing while apologizing for everything. More importantly, Derek brought the children over that Saturday afternoon. Lily, now 4.5, was cautious at first, as if she could not quite remember who I was. However, when I presented the toy kitchen set I had preserved in my spare room for her visits, something in her expression brightened. James, almost 3, was less reserved. He ran to me with his arms raised, wanting to be held, and I picked him up, inhaling that delightful toddler scent of apple juice and baby shampoo. Derek sat in my living room while the children played, staring at his hands. Vanessa wants to come over sometime to apologize in person, he mentioned. When you are ready. I am not interested in performing forgiveness for her benefit, I replied. However, the children can visit regularly. That is non-negotiable. I understand. We have worked out a schedule every Saturday afternoon if that suits you. It suited me, more than suited me. Over the following months, Derek and I gradually rebuilt our relationship. It was not the same as before. That trust had been fractured, and some cracks do not fully heal. However, we established a new foundation, one grounded in honesty about what had transpired and his sincere efforts to make amends. He began therapy, began questioning the dynamics in his marriage, began recalling who he had been before Vanessa reshaped him. Vanessa and I maintained a cool peace. She never came to my home, and I never requested to visit theirs. We existed in separate orbits, connected solely by Derek and the children. I learned through Derek that she had been furious about the lawyer's letter, about the humiliation of being called out by her own father, about losing control of the narrative she had constructed. Yet above all, I heard the sound of my grandchildren laughing in my backyard. I watched as Lily assisted me in planting tomatoes in the garden, where Richard's roses still bloomed. I read stories to James in the rocking chair that belonged to my mother. I lived in my house, my home, and I did not take a single moment of it for granted anymore. The trust Richard and I established accomplished precisely what it was intended to do. It safeguarded our assets and ensured they would pass to Derek according to our wishes, not according to someone else's manipulation. More importantly, it granted me the leverage I needed to confront someone who believed she could take everything from me simply because I loved my grandchildren. Some individuals mistake kindness for weakness. They confuse a grandmother's love for desperation. Vanessa learned that distinction, and I learned that sometimes the best way to win is to allow someone to believe they have already triumphed, right up until the moment they discover they have not won anything at all. Please subscribe to my channel. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.